It turns out that over the past couple of decades, the middle class in North America has actually been shrinking for reasons that we discussed in a previous video I made that got honestly a criminally low number of views. But anyways, I've been pretty fascinated lately with the main elements that differentiate the poor from the middle class as well as the wealthy. And interestingly, although we are about to cover some of the main elements that do come into play, well, the main differentiating factor that I was able to uncover was not one or a set of tangible actions per se, but rather a mentality towards earning income, and more importantly, how to actually retain and invest that income for the long term. In fact, mindset and experience towards money is the very reason why apparently 70% of lottery winners actually end up going broke, and a third even go on to declare bankruptcy. You really just can't bypass the experience acquired through decades of building your financial literacy. Realistically, the way you treat money right now wouldn't change even if tomorrow morning you woke up with $1 million sitting in your bank account. Hey, my name is Griffin, by the way, and if you're new here, well, this channel is all about helping you better your personal finances and your investments, which if you're watching this video, chances are you're somewhere near the beginning of your financial journey, which is awesome. Everyone starts there, including billionaires. So if you're ready to jump in and kick some middle class money traps to the curb, let's start with the first one being an unsurmountable level of personal student loan debt to pay for a degree or any other form of higher education without necessarily having a clear career path in mind. Now, the definition of what makes up the middle class is kind of loose, but typically just comes down to income brackets, right? So someone who's in the middle class is probably going to make between around $55,000 and around $120,000 on the top end. But basically, these are a class of people who are pretty much law-abiding, tax-paying citizens that aren't necessarily challenging the status quo all too much. And if you were like me, well, from a young age, we're pretty much programmed to go to school, get good grades, and then go to university to study a subject that you think is interesting at age 18, literally. And then you're expected to transition over into a career based on that major that you picked at 18 years old. That right there is the traditional middle class narrative that's all too common in today's society and honestly can create a lot of social pressure, even though this isn't necessarily a mold that's fit for everyone. In fact, only 27% of college grads in the US have a job related to their major, and 70% of grads aren't even using their degree at all or can't find a job in their field of study. That's insane, especially considering the fact that average cost of higher education in the US has increased by 1,200% since 1980, while inflation is up only 236. Of course, that's before 2022, but let's not even get started on that. And even here in Canada, since 1990, the government's share of university funding has dropped by nearly half, while the actual cost of tuition has risen by nearly 300%. What's even more striking is that total student loan debt has more than doubled since the 2008 financial recession, now sitting at $1.75 trillion and continues to grow at a pace that is 6 times faster than the American economy. This is obviously a problem, but realistically, it's not the wealthy people who live in the bird streets of LA that are feeling the repercussions of this. No, it's the middle class, right? Where this debt becomes a huge financial burden for all of these young people looking to kickstart their financial lives, but are actually starting miles behind the starting line. Now, don't get me wrong, before you turn off this video, I'm not inherently bashing university, right? Education of all kinds is truly the cornerstone to financial literacy as well as success. So if a degree to become a lawyer or engineer is your ticket to that, then all power to you. But general education, just in the form of a 4-year bachelor degree that costs tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, just because it's the thing to do, is one of those middle class narratives that can very rapidly turn into a money trap that's crippling financially for decades. And look, I went to university, I have a degree in business, even though I don't really use it on a day-to-day basis, sorry mind that, but I know many other people, even in my circle, that went to university just kind of under that social narrative and pressure, really not knowing what they wanted to do. And now a couple of years go by, they're not really sure, drop out, and they're left with student loan debt. That's something that should really try to be avoided at all costs. So really the point I want you to retain from this is that before jumping into any program, not necessarily knowing that it is 100% what you want to do, fully consider both the financial implications of carrying student loan debt for potentially, decades in the future as you're paying it off, and also really understanding what type of returns you can expect on that investment into your own education with a certain career. All right, now other than massive higher education debts, the middle class also tend to blur the lines between what is an expensive liability and what are assets, without making asset accumulation a priority early on in life when ultimately it is the most important. And look, I get it, you don't know what you don't know, and personally I had absolutely no idea what an asset was at the age of 17. Even thinking back to my Finance 101 class that I had in high school, I can only clearly remember one project where we're actually pricing out a car and financing a car. The problem with the middle class, though, is that when you're fresh off the press with your new degree in hand and an average $35,000 worth of student loan debt, well, most people tend to actually not stop there. They leverage their new entry-level salary in order to get a nice new flat in the city and lease a brand new car. Let's go. Here's the thing, even though the bank does let you list down the value of your car over in your assets column, well, it's not an asset. It's just not, unless we're speaking about a gated manual Lamborghini Murcielago, but somehow I doubt it. Now, I'm bringing up cars here because usually this is one of the first expensive liabilities that people tend to buy right out of college, but ultimately this applies to any expensive liability. And the problem with expensive liabilities early on in your career is twofold. First and foremost, well, on a monthly basis, they lower your cash flow that you can use in order to save and invest with, which of course has a long-term detrimental effect on the compounded growth of your investments. But the second thing that a lot of people actually don't consider at all is that expensive liabilities on your balance sheet bog it down, and so therefore it becomes a lot harder to actually get approved for loans later on if you're looking to start investing, say, in rental properties, right? Banks look at your debt to income ratio, and if you have expensive liabilities in your balance sheet, well, unfortunately that's going to play against you when you're looking to start investing. The absolute last position you want to find yourself in is a financial vortex of debt and liabilities. I was out with some buddies the other day who work in accounting, and they were telling me some stories. It's absolutely insane, right? People making, $750, $1 million a year, but have $1 million liabilities, and when the tax bill is due, need to take out personal loans to cover it. That makes absolutely no sense. And look, if you live in Ontario and make $54,242 per year, which happens to be the average graduate salary in Canada, well, this means that your after-tax take-home pay is $42,044, or just around $3,500 per month. So if you're paying $2,000 a month on an apartment, $500 a month on gas, insurance, and your car payments, as well as maybe $200 for utilities, and $500 a month on food and other random things, well, you're not left with much to save and invest with. And that right there is the number one difference between the middle class and the wealthy over time. Being able to invest, especially during recessionary periods where there is the most opportunity for long-term growth. If you aspire to one day leave the middle class and even just live a comfortable life, not having to eat beans and go back to work at McDonald's when you're supposed to be retired, well, you need to really start focusing on increasing your savings rate, which is the difference between your income as well as your expenses, ultimately so you can save and invest more. And lucky for you, I have a ton of videos on my channel that speak about how to start investing in the stock market, how to start investing in real estate. So take action today and start making accumulating assets an important driving factor in your financial life. All right, so hopefully at this point it's been made clear in today's video that above acquiring expensive liabilities, well, any type of high interest consumer debt or credit card debt also should be avoided at all costs. This is one of the most financially crippling elements that keeps people from achieving higher levels of wealth over time and breaking through what can seem like a never-ending hamster wheel of high interest payments. And so this is where today's video sponsor Upstart comes in to help you finally create an actionable plan towards ridding yourself of your high interest debts. Upstart has helped over 1.8 million customers on their path towards financial freedom by paying off credit cards, consolidating high interest debts, or even funding personal expenses, all with one simple fixed monthly payment that has a clear payoff date. And what makes Upstart different is that they look at more than just your credit score when qualifying you for a loan, right? You're more than just a number, so Upstart's model actually takes into account other factors such as your income, your employment, as well as some other information in your loan application to find a smarter rate for your loan. So don't wait and check your rate today at upstart.com/milks. That's upstart.com/milks to get your rate, and also make sure to use the top link in the description to let them know that I sent you. All right, so somewhat building off of the second trap, which was blurring the lines between assets and liabilities, one of the quintessential mistakes that so many people in the middle class fall victim to is failing to understand how a debt to income ratio works in the context of borrowing to invest, and then simply going out and buying the most expensive house that they can qualify for based on their entry level position and or just really any salary in question, maxing out that debt to income ratio on a primary residence, which essentially makes you house poor, but then also severely limits your capacity to borrow any more funds in the future for investment purposes. This is seriously something that we see time and time again, where if you're simply going out and buying a brand new construction or a turnkey property right at market value, that can be okay depending on your goals and aspirations, but just understand that that is very much a commodity that you're buying at market value instead of an investment where there's any capacity whatsoever to try and actually appreciate the value of the property and make this an investment that contributes to the growth of your net worth. So just like with the expensive liabilities that we spoke about earlier, just understand that buying an expensive house right out the gate absolutely contributes to premature lifestyle inflation, which has huge financial repercussions right now, but also of course in the future as it limits your savings rate and therefore the growth of any type of investment portfolio that you'd be able to put together. Now I can already see people in the comments saying you literally just posted a short a couple of days ago speaking about how a home is one of the best investments that someone in the middle class can make. And yes, that is true, all right? Owning a home is one of the best investments you can make over decades of holding it and really contributes the largest portion of the net worth of people who have a net worth under around $1 million, right? And so this is because of things such as appreciation over time, as well as debt pay down and a couple other factors. What I'm speaking about though is going out right out the gate, buying an expensive house, maxing out your budget, and basically being house poor in the time being, fully limiting any other investment opportunities, and ultimately just living in a house that you can't afford. And here's a perfect example of what I did in my own life, right? Instead of buying a $500,000 house right out the gate when I had my first job, no, what I did instead was I bought a house that was worth half that and renovated it myself, really just putting in that sweat equity. So I got it for around $325,000. Now after renovating it for a year, it's worth more than double that value, right? That is what you should be doing at the beginning of your life in order to level up financially. Okay, moving on to middle class trap and number 4. Realistically, this probably should have been trap number 2 to follow more of a chronological order as someone in the middle class progresses through life. But once you have your expensive education and you're ready to start adding expensive liabilities to your balance sheet, well, that needs to be paid for somehow. So most people end up transitioning straight from university into a job if you're, lucky enough to get one out of university. But this job comes with a cushy entry-level salary, which becomes the sole primary source of income for the foreseeable future. Now, luckily, this can be avoided by practicing one of the most important lessons that comes in one of the cheapest financial literacy books that you can buy, Rich Dad Poor Dad, being that you need to be minding your own business even if you maintain a job. Don't get me wrong, a job is a fantastic way to start gaining experience and also building up a small nest egg, as I did and pretty much everyone does. However, it is critical that you start also minding your own business, meaning looking to increase your sources of income and creating other types of side hustles or businesses if you want to be successful. The reality is that we live in an increasingly competitive world, so simply relying on one single income stream is sort of playing with fire, and like with your investments, you want to diversify, so you should also be diversifying your sources of income. Leveraging the stability of your job and employment income to focus on creating more income streams such as portfolio investments, real estate investments, and also hopefully a side hustle is critical in an increasingly expensive and competitive market. And by the way, if you don't like the job you're currently in, develop more skills and try a different job, a different career. Nothing is set in stone anymore. But career complacency just because you have a salary that pays the bills could very well lead to regret down the line, which who the heck wants that? Alright, and finally, let's talk about trap number 5, which is honestly kind of a couple of different ideas all grouped together, but 5 traps kind of sounds better than 7.5 traps in a title. Trying to actively trade as your main way to get wealthy, not setting and sticking to an investment plan, and failing to be strategic about investments from a tax strategy standpoint. So yeah, that's a lot. Let's start with number 1, being trying to actively trade as one of your main ways to become wealthy over time. Here's the thing, for like 99% of retail investors, actively spending your time trying to beat the market is typically not going to be worth your time investment as opposed to just investing in the broad market for the long term. The reason for this is that even if, let's say, you do hit a home run and have a 10x investment, well, not having a 10x investment with a large amount of capital is not going to really move the needle, right? If you invest $1,000 in something and get a 10x investment, that's really fantastic, but being able to replicate that over and over again is not really something that's feasible. And so spending your time working on increasing your income first is typically going to have a much higher return on investment over the long term. Keep in mind that many wealthy people who invest in the market do so in order to retain their wealth and also create a new passive income source for themselves. This isn't going to be their main means to get wealthy in the first place. Part 2 is not creating and sticking to an investment plan over the long term that's actually suitable for your own needs and goals as an investor. And this is more important than ever in the current market that we're living in, with a massive influx of retail investors that have came into the stock market market over the past couple of years. Keep in mind that while it's now fantastic that retail investors can manage their own money and investments to save on fees, well, most wealthy people actually have professional money and investment managers, right? And there's a reason for this. That is because wealthy people understand the opportunity cost of trying to actively manage their own investments instead of spending their time and energy focusing on building businesses and increasing their income on a monumental basis, which has a much larger impact when you pour all that income back into investments. So look, obviously I speak about this all the time on my YouTube channel. I manage my own money and my own investments, but that's really why I do like to utilize broad market exchange traded funds as the solid foundation to my portfolio for long-term growth. And sure, I'll pick and choose individual stocks that I believe in every once in a while, but that isn't the main focus that I have for creating wealth over the long term. And finally, just never thinking about how tax strategy comes into play in regards to your money and your investments in the bigger picture, right? Which has a huge impact, because if you're able to save $5,000-$10,000 a year on income tax, that again has a monumental impact on the growth of an investment portfolio over several years of compounding. So right off the bat, some of the easiest things that you can start implementing is making sure you're maxing out any of your registered investment accounts, right? So the RRSP and the TFSA in Canada, the IRA and the Roth IRA, as well as like the 401k in the United States. Utilizing the IRA and the RRSP, these are great ways that you can lower your taxable income and therefore pay less income tax at the end of the year, right? So not understanding that these are tools that you can use to your advantage can of course have a huge impact on your finances. Other things to consider, again, I love real estate investing, and one thing that's awesome about real estate is that you can actually depreciate the value of those buildings over time, right? Which lowers dramatically your tax bill at the end of the year because you're depreciating the value of your assets against any of your other income. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind. The world of taxation is huge, and really you should be speaking to an accountant in order to better help you based on your situation. But everything we just spoke about in today's video needs to be up here so that moving forward you can try to avoid these money traps that the middle class fall victim to as much as possible. If you're interested in why the middle class is shrinking and the rich get richer, make sure to check out this video right here. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like. It really helps the channel out. Subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified of new personal finance and investing videos. And thanks again to Upstart for sponsoring today's video. So with that said, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you in the next one.